All right, like Joe said, my name is Trevor Calabro. Um, I'm the Senior User Experience Strategist here at Atten, and I'm here to talk with you about how to design and facilitate usability tests, right? So a little bit about me before we get started. I absolutely love usability testing. It's my favorite method of all the UX research methods. I've been doing it for 15 plus years, and I found that usability testing is the single best way to find errors in your designs in order to fix them. So I'm excited to share this experience with you today. This is, I do a much longer version of this. And even at one point I have a 2-day seminar, but this is all the Cliff Notes condensed. So we want to make it actionable. We have a teacher person to fish model here. So I believe after this, there are some handouts and takeaways. After this presentation, you can take the handouts and you should be able to do this on your own. And I really encourage you to do so. So I hope I can convince you that usability testing is something that you could start doing soon. So more specifically, I want this webinar to show you some tools to run your own tests like I talked about. I'm also going to give you some tips and tricks on how to facilitate. Facilitating is more of an art than a science and it takes some time, but if you have some upfront tips and tricks, it's really helpful. And then I want you to see one in real time. So what we did was we have a person standing by, a non-biased third-party participant who's going to actually do a usability test. So I'm going to talk to you about it, show you some methods, and then we're going to bring in a real person who doesn't make websites for a living, who is a good representative of a real user here. So it's pretty exciting. It's a little bit of a wild card webinar because I never know how it's going to go. So hopefully we can get some good examples here in the real world. Quick agenda is I want to talk to you about some prerequisites and materials you're going to need to do usability testing, right? There's some stuff you need to have first. Then I want to talk to you about sample sizing. This is a question I get all the time about pretty much all UX research, but this one in particular. Then the fun part, the facilitation tips and tricks, and then we're going to run that real live test. I'm going to try my best to do the tips and tricks live. And then we'll debrief on what happened during the live demo. And I'm going to talk a little bit about reporting your findings. Many people have a lot of questions about that. I have a whole nother talk about that, how to quantify qualitative research, and this is qualitative. So we're not going to dive too deeply in there. I want to really focus on the facilitation tips and running a usability test. And like I said, the handouts will give you the framework, so you don't need to take notes. So anything kind of important I'll highlight will be in the handouts. So before we get started, let's just kind of have a baseline here. What is a usability test? What do I mean by that? So there are many definitions, but here's how I say it. It's when you set up a real world scenario made up of real world tasks and then ask real representative users to execute those tasks as you watch them and take notes. Okay, so usability testing is about testing your assumptions, your design assumptions. So user-centered design, it's not just a buzzword. And usability testing it's kind of the oldest and truest form of user-centered design testing like available. And lastly, running usability tests is the way almost all successful organizations in a modern tech-based economy measure user-centered design success. So I want you to really internalize that. This is the benchmark for how people make good product. So there's many reasons why people say they cannot figure out the time and budget to run a test, but I want to make the argument today that you can't afford not to. And I've seen this practice transform entire organizations. I saw it transform a multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate that I was the head usability researcher for their ops team, and it happened in less than 18 months. So my goal here today is to convince you that usability testing is not only necessary, but it can also be done cheaply, easily, and quickly. So let's get into it. So let's talk about the prereqs and the materials. So here's what you need just before you even start planning your test. You're going to need a prototype or a product to test with, right? That makes sense. So you'll need a high fidelity all the way to low fidelity or anywhere in between kind of prototype, even to like a live version of code, right? Like a live site itself. So I want to focus on low fidelity because I'm making this argument that it's cheap and easy, but you can certainly do this on high fidelity. And when I say high fidelity, I mean like a pixel perfect design that's done in a product like Figma or Adobe XD or InVision, Sketch, or even the active code like I talked about. But today we're going to focus on what I mean by low fidelity. And I'm going to give you an example. They're just simple things. So this is an example. This photo is an example of a low fidelity prototype. You can see that a designer drew out screens on pieces of paper. So this could have taken a designer a matter of minutes to make, right? So don't feel pigeonholed by having a pixel perfect design. You can get valid data from something as simple as this. This is also a picture of a usability test in session. So if you look on the left, you can see there's the hand of the test facilitator, and then on the right, there's the hand of the test participant, and the participant there has a pen, and they're using that as their cursor, and they're saying, oh, I'd click here. And then what happens, a facilitator just swaps out that screen piece of paper for whatever screen is next. And it can be that low tech, and you can get great data from these kind of low fidelity prototypes. So once you have a prototype or product, what you're going to need is a primary audience or data-driven personas. So if you're not familiar with a persona, it's just, I'm talking about, take the data from your organization that's gathered on groups of your users, right? And then if you categorize those groups, those are personas. And persona is a widely used UX tool. I would venture most of you have these already. I would encourage you to look out to the marketing department if you don't already have some, but you can take the existing personas and you can use that to figure out who your participants are going to be for your usability tests, right? So that's the number one thing is you need to know who to recruit for your test, and that's going to be from these either your audience data or your more specific personas. And then you're going to need to create a real world scenario, like I said in the definition, with real world tasks that resonate with the actual audience. So you're going to need this kind of data. So whenever I say this, I always get the question, so what if our audience data isn't so easy to categorize? Or what if our stakeholders don't all agree on the audience breakdown that we have adopted in our organization? So really quickly, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but there is another alternative called the jobs to be done framework. You could Google this and find a lot of information, but essentially jobs to be done is you identify an actual job that the user has to do. That's broken down into functional and emotional aspects. And then you take the emotional and you break it into personal and social. And then what you do is you'll break down that user need into a format like this, which is called a jobs to be done statement. And the way you fill out the statement is something like this. When, insert situation, I want to take a motivated action so I can have an expected outcome. So you want to fill the statement out from your user's perspective, right? So ideally, you would even do this based off of some data, right? But no matter how little, it's still good to have some data, but you can make some educated guesses and fill this out. This is a way to fast track the writing of your test questions. So if you don't have the personas set in stone, you can do this. All right, moving right along. So we got our prototype or product. You have your user data or jobs to be done. And then I want to talk to you about the third thing, this what I call the top task list. So a top task list is something you're going to need to create. And this is a great thing, not just for usability testing, but a great artifact that you can have to do all kinds of UX research. So I highly recommend doing these. And to make this list, it's real simple. What you do is you ask what are the critical actions that your users need to do on your site or app. And by critical, what I mean is something to fulfill a promise in the marketplace for your organization. So for example, let's just say you run a website that sells birdseed. So the ability to purchase birdseed on a birdseed website would be that critical task, right? Then once you've identified all those critical tasks, you're going to go through and do like find the common tasks. And how do I identify a common task? It's like the 80-20 rule, right? Like the Pareto rule. So think of things that people do on your website all the time, but they may not be critical, meaning it doesn't fulfill a promise to the marketplace. So for example, if you get a lot of traffic on your website for people looking at job openings because everyone's really interested in trying to work for your organization, that's not a promise. Like you don't make job openings or you're not selling job openings, but since you have so much traffic there, you're most likely going to want to test that in your usability test. So you're going to want to add those common tasks to your top task list. And a rule of thumb here is you want to shoot for 10 to 15 tasks. The reason being is your task list, if it gets too long, your participants will get fatigued. So think of this task list as your questions. They're the framework for the questions that you will put within your usability test script. All right, so those are the prereqs. Now let's talk about the actual materials you're going to need. And I broke this down into two things. I broke it down into virtual testing and then in-person testing. I'm going to focus mostly on virtual testing because I've been a huge proponent of virtual usability testing, even pre-COVID. But now that we live in a touch-free environment, it's much more efficient and much more desirable for many people, to not all make sure everyone has their vaccinations, just to be able to run a usability test. So you can do these things virtually, and you get just as good data. So of course, the first thing you're going to need is some kind of video platform, Zoom, Google Meets, Teams. We're using Zoom today, but all these work the same. You're going to need a test script. And before I break this down, I want to talk to you about, and the test script is going to be the same for the virtual and the in-person. And it's based off of that top task list that we just identified. Now, one of the handouts is a test script template. And it's unlike anything you will find on Google. This is something I've used personally for years, way before I even worked for Atten. And so this has been tested on hundreds, no, actually, I'd say thousands of users have used this, have been tested through this script. So I know it's vetted, I know it works. And I want to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the test script. So when you get the handout, you can kind of follow along. So a good test script has essentially 5 sections to it. One, an intro. This is where you'll explain to the participants what's about to happen, because most participants don't do this all the time, so they don't know what it is, and why the test is being conducted in the first place. Now, I'm going to actually do this when we demo. I'm going to do all 5 of these steps with our real demo participant later on. So, keep an eye open. So yeah, think of it as just what and why we're doing a test. Then the second component is a legal agreement. And this is like, I explained to the participant that I'm going to hit record, and are you okay with that? So that's one part. I also like a 2-level of consent method here, where I'll also send the participant a document in which they sign. Just a note about this, even when they sign the document and they agree on screen, if at any time in the future a former participant contacts you and says, please get rid of all my personal identifying information, which means their face, their voice, their email, all that stuff, you are required to do that. So just a note. So try to, more of the story there is try to keep all your assets in one spot so you can track them. And then I like to go over some ground rules. Now, this is to set the expectations for the participant, right? So what we talk about in the ground rules, and you'll hear me do this, I'm going to give you an abridged version, but you'll hear me really do my real spiel during the demo. So, I like to say something like this, like, before we start, I'd like you to know the following. We're here to evaluate the prototype or the site, not you as a participant, right? So there are no right or wrong answers here. We want to see if the prototype seems logical to you and the way you think, not the other way around, not can you figure out this system, right? We want this to be intuitive. So, and then I say, we're going to have you do 2 things. I want you to act totally normal, but I'm going to have you do 2 things that aren't like you would try to act normally. One is, please talk me through all your actions and thoughts as you do them. This is called the Think Out Loud protocol. And the reason we have participants do this, although it's not like the real world, it really sheds insight on why. Because what we're doing here is most importantly for defining the why behaviors happened, not just the what, right? So quant, we can go to Google Analytics and figure out what happened. Usability tests are really great for explaining why, and that why is what gives you exactly what you need to do to make the right fixes. You cannot just use Google Analytics to figure out the right fixes. And then I always like to follow up and say, oh, the second thing is, please tell me when you think you've completed an activity, right? This is not natural. So I have, and you'll hear me say this to the participant, but like I have them literally say like, and I believe I've completed the task or something like that, right? So that we know to move on. And then I say, I always put this one in there, like, you don't need to be nice, right? People when they get in this environment, they know that you're a representative of the organization and they don't want to hurt your feelings sometimes. So I always like to say explicitly up front, you do not need to be nice. If you don't like something, please tell me. That's how we fix things. In fact, it's better for you to be candid. And then always follow up with the last question. Does this all make sense? Do you have any questions before we get started? Now, there's a lot of methodologies out there that say there's no, to not bias the data, you should not build any rapport. In my experience, and I've been doing this for a very long time, 10,000 plus hours of usability testing, that's a fallacy. You're going to want to build some type of rapport. So I also say, once we get into the test session, I'm going to flip a switch and be test person. So if I don't answer your questions sufficiently, it's because I don't want to bias the data that we gather here today, right? So I do encourage you to build some rapport in this beginning section, and then and you can write it right in your test script, which we have in the template. And then now we're getting to the meat of everything. The fourth is your literal questions. So these are derived from your top task list. The big thing here is you're going to want to order your top tasks. So after you figure out your top tasks, you want to order them in some kind of logical workflow. So you aren't having participants like always start from the homepage. This is a common error for people who are running their first couple tests. So for example, the first question might be something like this. You've landed on the homepage from a Google search link, and you want to find some general information about this organization. How would you do that, right? That's a common thing people might actually do. And then the second, and this is, if one of the critical or common tasks was find general information about the organization, that's why that would be a really good first question. And then you see how it's real world because we brought them verbally to the page through Google search, right? We don't need them to literally Google. You just need to build that scenario up so that it puts the participant at ease and gives them context. So a really good second question would be, if the first question was find general information, the second question could be, then now that you've found the general information that you were looking for, you want to find the email address of someone to get in touch with about us, like a sales representative. How would you do that? So that you can see how I'm daisy chaining these logically. So they would go from the homepage to then some, wherever, to some sales page, and then jump around to some logical next point. And the rule of thumb here is start broad with your questions and get more specific. And that's how you know that you're putting it in a logical workflow. It would be really unusual to start off by find some general information, now buy the product, right? That's usually not how users go through the experience. And then lastly, I like to close with a survey. This is a great opportunity to get some anecdotal data around satisfaction, right? And you'll hear me actually ask these questions. Or I'll just tell you now, because I don't think we'll probably not have enough time in the demo, but I ask questions like, here's some good examples. I ask questions like, what were your general impressions of the site or prototype? Did you find any activities especially hard to complete, easy to complete, or did none of them stand out either way? Side note, you always want to give that out option, that third option. Another question would be, do you have any suggestions for how we could improve this site? And then do you have any final questions, concerns, comments that you want to make before we end today? So this is really good because it gives you that final layer of context to your script. It also gives like a sense of closure, right? Without these questions, you kind of would just end. You're like, okay, you're done, thanks, right? You want to, like I said, build rapport, end with a sense of closure, and then it's really great for pull quotes for your reporting at the end. So this is, like I said, it's anecdotal laid on top of anecdotal, but what you can do is you find patterns through the tests that you hold, and then you go back through and find these quotes, these pull quotes, and you can just place them right in line in your report. It really helps to humanize and strengthen everything you found. All right, so back to the agreement here. So we've got the test script, your legal agreement, and then the links for technical troubleshooting. So this is just like, you want to have some links like in your clipboard, links to the site you want them to test or the prototype, links to any tech, like maybe the OS or the browser you're using, anything that could crop up. The rule of thumb here is just like, be prepared for anything, because where there is tech, there's bound to be tech issues, right? So this is one reason why I always advocate for running a test of the test. And that's just to debug before you go live. So maybe you do one test with friends and family first before you go to real participants, just to see how it would work in real life. All right, now let's contrast that with in-person testing. So in-person testing, you're going to need a test lab. You're going to need a physical space, right? That, or the alternative is travel to each of your participants' work environments, right? Which is extremely costly. So this is another reason why I advocate for virtual testing. You're going to have the same test script, so that's exactly the same as virtual. Same exact legal agreement, right? So the that legal agreement written out for the 2 levels of authentication. And then here's something people never consider is you're going to need 2 employees or 2 people involved on the website, one to take notes and one to moderate the test. So The beauty of this is if you do it virtually, like say through Zoom, we get a great video of the participant's face, so you can derive all this data from there, as well as we have a video of their screen and what they're actually doing with their cursor. That in and of itself is enough. So you can just go back. It can be a single person job. You can administer the test and then go back and scrub through and rewatch for specific moments to gather your data. Now, you can kind of do the same in person, but this means you need over-the-shoulder cameras, and it's a lot, it feels a lot more not real, right? So one of the key things is to have a real-world environment. So if you're in this sterile test lab, that's a lot less, you're going to be a lot less at ease as a participant. Like virtual testing, the participants are on their own machines using their own browsers. So it's a win-win. So I highly advocate for virtual testing, unless you already have a lab set up and you're a huge multi-billion-dollar organization. But for the rest of us, virtual testing is the way to go. All right, real quick, I want to talk about sample sizing. This is the biggest misconception that I see and point of debate within the UX world. I get most questions about this. And how many test participants do I need to get valid data in my usability test? Drum roll, please. The moment of truth, 5. It's just 5. So some people think that usability testing is very costly and complex, and that user testing should be reserved only for rare web design projects with huge budgets and lavish timelines. This is just simply not true. That sentiment has given usability testing a bad rap, and I'm sick of it. I'm here to dispel that notion. This right here is a chart that shows you why 5 is the optimal number. You can see when you hit 6, you start to get this diminishing return. The idea here is, and the argument is, well, that's not statistically valid, right? We are not trying to get statistically valid data here. This is qualitative research. And the idea is, if you have enough budget to run to test 15 participants, it's better to break that up into 3 mini tests of 5 participants. So you test 5 people, you get the data back, it'll unearth all these things that you should change. If there is an error, you should change it, right? So it unearths all this stuff. You then make the changes, then make a new prototype, test 5 new participants using the exact same test script, and then rinse and repeat. And what you're doing here is think about, instead of like forging a new sword every minute, or every test, what you're doing is you're slowly refining and sharpening the blade through each one. And this is Jacob Nielsen, one of the partners in the Nielsen-Norman Group, the world's foremost think tank on usability matters. He has this great quote that I think couldn't sum it up any better. It says, "Elaborate usability tests are a waste of resources. The best results come from testing no more than 5 users and running as many small tests as you can afford." All right, now let's get into the fun stuff. So let's talk about how to facilitate a test. This part is everything I've talked to you up till now is you can just figure it out. You could read a blog, you could read a book. I just gave you the cliff notes of all my experience and all the books I've read. This takes time, and I'm going to tell you 3 main facilitation techniques that you can use. This, like I said, it's like the more you do it, the better you get at it. And they all have funny names. So there's the boomerang technique, there's the echo, and there's the Columbo. So let's break down each one of these. The boomerang is when you're not answering a participant's actual question, but instead sending it right back to them in an inquisitive tone for further explanation. So remember, what we're trying to do here is get that qualitative data. We're trying to understand why the users have done certain behaviors, right? So for example, if the participant says something like this during the test, "If I click this button, where will it take me?" And by the way, people ask these kind of questions, especially if it's a prototype. Then you as a facilitator could do the boomerang and just send that right back. So if I click this button, where will it take me? Where would you expect that button to take you if you were to click it? You see how I didn't answer it? Think of this as like the politician tool. Politicians do this kind of thing all the time when they never answer a question. Next, the echo. This is also referred to as mirroring, and it's simply repeating the last 1 to 3 words that a participant says, again, ending in that like higher inflection tone. And it's to elicit them to clarify something that they said that you found unclear. So you want your data to be, explicit. So if they say some terms and you want to be more explicit, the echo is a great technique. And this one's really easy to do. I recommend the echo be the first one you choose. So if the participant says the same question, "If I click this button, where will it take me?" you could just simply say, take me, like a question. Yeah, and note how I say that upwardly. You don't want to sound downwardly. That'll be like that. If you say it with an upward inflection, it sounds not critical, not judgmental, and it elicits a question. And it's human nature to answer people's questions. And then the last one, and the funniest one, of course, is the Columbo. So this is acting dumb and stumbling through a follow-up question to encourage the participant to jump in and like take further, to explain something further, right? So using this technique when the boomerang or mirroring seems out of context. And this is named after the, Peter Falk's portrayal of TV's favorite Detective Columbo. This dates me. You can probably tell how old I am that I've actually seen Columbo. But essentially, if you haven't seen Columbo, if you're, not born if you're born in, I don't know, if you're not a millennial, then what he would do was he would get criminals to like confess just by acting dumb, because they would get so frustrated that he was like assuming wrong things and stumbling through his sentences that they would jump in and pretty much just, incriminate themselves. So same thing here. If the participant says, if I click this button, where will it take me? You could say, button, I'm acting confused. Like, what do you mean by button? Take what? And this one's more a more advanced technique. This is not the example I just used is not a good one. It's really when it doesn't make sense to do the other two techniques. So if I can do a Columbo in the demo, it'll be a miracle. I'll try my best. And then I have 4 quick things to avoid before we actually run the demo. One is you never want to interrupt participants in mid-task, right? So everything I just talked to you is about intervention. You only want to intervene when you want clarity, and you never want to get clarity in the middle of mid-task. So rule of thumb is stay silent while they're doing anything, right? The next, refusing to answer a question. So there are some philosophies out there that say to be totally methodologically sound, you must not answer questions. So meaning if the participant asks you a question, instead of using one of those techniques, you say, I'm unable to answer your questions. This is a test. Like that's just so cold, and it's not going to give you the data you want. And I found that although the data is a little anecdotal to begin with, it does not harm the data. You can still come to great conclusions if you do these intervention techniques. In fact, I don't know how people get the real why behind actions without them. Another big one that I see a lot for people that are doing their first couple tests is assuming the participant is done with an action. So just like you have to be comfortable with silence, you have to be comfortable with them stumbling around. So many times someone will execute and finalize a task, but they don't know that the task has been completed. And this is why I have them overtly say out loud, and I believe I've completed the task. So there have been cases where I've stayed silent for 5 minutes until the person finally clicked in their mind, like, are we supposed to move on now? And I'll say something like, do you expect us to move on now? That's a boomerang right there. And then lastly, you don't want to have any physical reactions to participants' actions during the test. So many times we're so close to these designs. Many times you're testing and you also help design it, right? So if they're about to do something wrong and you're on Zoom and they can see your little thumbnail video and you go, or yeah, you shake your head yes while they're explaining something out loud. Those are very leading, and I want to start to put this thought in your mind that you don't want to lead them to the answers. You want them to do their things naturally. So for instance, a nice like neutral thing, because your participants will look to you for verification and vindication. So you want to do neutral reactions. So if they ask you a question, you can do a neutral or just some kind of upward inflection, but I would not say yes, no, any of those kind of things. And this goes again to the leading language. You want to avoid using words that lead. This is straight from the handout. So if you're able to download the handout, you can see, but you want to not use the word test. You want to use the word study. You don't want to say click. You want to say find, and then sometimes you have to get verbose, like instead of close and delete, you want to say remove temporarily, remove permanently. And the reason why is you don't want to use terms that are found within the UI, because people will try to game this test. It's just human nature, meaning if you have like say, for instance, you have a button on your UI that says compare our products, you wouldn't want to ask this question. You'd like to compare the product A to product B. How would you do that, right? Because they're just going to target in on the word compare. So that could bias your data. So instead, I would write something more like this. You'd like to see the differences between product A and product B. How would you do that? Now, a little caveat, sometimes this is really hard to do. It's sometimes hard to be like explicit without getting confusing. This is another reason why I advocate a test of the test, is to see whether your questions that are scrubbed of bias, which I call this question, we just scrubbed it of its biases, see if it still makes sense to the user, to the participant. All right, it's time. Let's see if we can get this in there. So I'm going to bring our test participant who's been in a green room, isolated, headphones, probably listening to some great music. So Sutan, could you please enter frame? Hi, this is Sutan Magruder. Sutan, you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
So full disclosure, Sutan and I are friends, but he has no idea what we're about to do. He just knows that I'm going to ask him some questions, and he doesn't make websites for a living. So Sutan, why don't you just give a short bio of who you are and what you do for a living?
Yeah, so I am a psychologist. I work for a large university. I'm not sure if I can be specific here in State College. So yeah, that's what I do for a living, working as a psychologist.
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a actual test that we've been talking about. So here we go. Could you share your screen, please?
Yes.
Now I'm going to because this is a demo, I'm going to flip in between, and I'll say out loud, like I'm talking as a moderator now, like I'm talking to you, Sutan, or I'm talking as a person teaching how to test, right? Like a teacher. So right now, I'm talking like a teacher. And so we set this test up on a just common website, just apple.com, because I wanted Sutan to be able to do this. So I just sent him the link through the Zoom chat, and he clicked the link. Here's where I say stuff like, I see that you've opened. This is the beginning part, that first intro of the 5-part test script. So I might say something to a participant like this, like, oh, I see you've opened this in Chrome. Is that your normal browser?
Yes.
So you use Chrome most of the time?
Yep.
All right, very good. And do you mind just describing what device you're on?
I am using a PC, I think Windows PC, and I'm set up with my laptop and then 2 additional monitors.
And what monitor are you looking at this website on?
I'm on my second monitor, I guess. It's a Dell monitor.
So like your desktop, it's not on the laptop. Okay, excellent.
Not on the desktop, no.
All right, well, I'm going to go through a little bit of spiel before we get started. First of all, I want to let you know, thank you for taking some time for participating. So what we're going to do today is we're going to get some data that's going to help us improve the way other people just like yourself use our website. So I just want to say thanks. We really appreciate it. And with that said, I'm going to hit record. Do you mind that I record your likeness in this conversation? It'll be used for my research team.
Yes.
Okay, I'm hitting record. All right, and then could I actually have you, I'm going to repeat that question, have you say it again so we have it on video just for legal purposes. This is what the lawyers have me do. So do you mind that we record this session? It'll be used for our internal research purposes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And make sure to sign, I already have that signed copy that you gave me of the written agreement. So everything's on the up and up. So I do appreciate you allowing us to use this information that we gathered today. So before we get started, I want to let you know we're here to evaluate this website, not to evaluate you, right? So there are no wrong answers. Whatever you say, whatever you do, I want you to just act as you normally would if you were going on the website. Now, I am going to read you a scenario, and I want you to put yourself in that scenario, but I don't want you to act like someone else, not like, oh, if I were a person who would do this. No, I want you to act as Sutan. How would you literally do this? Now, there are 2 things I want you to do that aren't like the real world, that aren't normal. One is, as you do things, I want you to say out loud what you're thinking. So for instance, if I were to say, you want to close the window, you might say something like, well, I know that the red X in the top right-hand corner of my machine closes the window, so I'm going to take and you're saying this as you move the cursor to the X. And then the second thing I want you to do that's not like the real world is when you think you've completed an activity that I've talked you through, say out loud something like, and I think I've completed the activity, just so we know to go on. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
All right, and lastly, you don't need to be nice. So although I'm here representing the company, the more candid you are, the better we can improve this thing. Okay, so we really want to see how your mental models act on this site. So any questions before we get started? Any comments?
No questions right now. A little nervous, but
All right. Well, along those lines, I am going to switch over to, once I start asking the activity questions, I may not be able to answer your questions sufficiently because we want to keep them consistent on all the other people, all the other participants of this study. So I'm going to, if you ask a question, I might not answer it sufficiently, but at the end, I'll answer any questions that you have, right?
okay.
All right, let's get started. So this is activity 1. You ready? Here we go. So your laptop just went kaput once and for all, and you're in the market for a new one. You've been a Mac person your whole adult life. So you start your research by opening up your favorite browser and typing in apple.com in the search bar. You've heard good things about the new MacBook Air. So that's where you want to start your search. So there's the scenario. Ready for the first activity?
Yes.
Okay. You want to find out how much the newest MacBook Air costs. How would you do that?
So I want to find out how much the newest MacBook Air costs. If I were, typically I would just open Google, a new page, and then I would type in, do I have to go through it? Should I go through what I would do?
What would you normally do?
Oh, so I would Google price of, I think it was Google, MacBook Air, or new MacBook Air, I probably would say. I would probably not go directly to the Apple website first. I would probably do like one of these, like Tom's Guide or CNET or something. But then I would go to the Apple website. Ooh. And then I would type in new MacBook Air. So this looks confusing.
Confusing?
Yes. So there's a lot of stuff here, and I thought it would take me right to MacBook Air. So what I would probably do is Apple stores. This looks interesting.
Interesting.
So
what interesting? Yeah. What? How would you, interesting?
So interesting because so when I explored it and this came up, it's a lot of words and confusing. And so I would think, well, the store would have it. So that's why I would go and click this. Now I'm frustrated. So I would probably take out MacBook Air. Oh, that's cool. That there was a, okay, I don't know what I'm doing now. So I would probably then go back here and, oh, well, this says Apple, so maybe that'll take me to the MacBook Air. Oh, there it is. So that's how I would get to the MacBook Air.
All right. Hey, I had a series of questions, but that was great. So everyone give Sutan a round of virtual applause. That was great. I was able to get all 3 of the techniques in there. That was incredible. Thank you so much. By the way, we should send this video to Apple. I mean, come on. Like that Absolutely. Search is not good.
That was captivating. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So this demo could not have gone any better. There's about 50% of users kind of go, a little more than 50% use the primary navigation at the top, that black bar. The other 50% of users kind of use like the content area with inline links. Sutan is one of these rare users that goes right to the search. And we call these people usually power users. This is someone who doesn't want to be bothered with going through like 6 clicks to figure something out, which is a very valid use case. And you can see for someone like Sutan, although he may not be the most common type of user when it comes to this because he did go to search, it was incredibly difficult for him to find what you would expect to be very easy to find on Apple's website, right? Excellent. That's, I mean, you want to improve search. There's anecdotal evidence right there, one participant. So these are the great types of things that you can find by doing workflow related usability testing. All right, thanks so much, Sutan.
Thanks
All
for
right, I'm
having
going to
me.
take over the screen again real quickly. That was great. I can't believe how well that went. There we go. Sorry, bear with me. That was
You're
great.
up.
Sometimes it doesn't always pan out. All righty. So let's debrief on a couple of things that happened there. So I kind of forced the Columbo, right, where I was going, right? I was given the old wink because I saw that Sutan he was really engaged as a true test participant. So I felt confident to be cheeky and wink into the camera. Of course, you would never do that for real. I was just cueing anyone watching. But yeah, so that was a really good use. He was saying a bunch of things that were ambiguous. And although I had a good idea of what he meant, I didn't know for sure. I didn't know what he meant by interesting. Like he said, this is interesting. Well, he clearly meant that in a negative way, but think about that pull quote in your report. The participant said this was interesting. I mean, that could be perceived as a good thing, right? So you really want to like dive in deeper, understand why, right? And he said all kinds of great stuff. He said things like, because we were recording, I'd be able to go back through and know the exact words and get some of those great pull quotes. But Sutan's experience there was a great one. He flat out said, I would not go to the website, right? So that like dispelled the whole premise, which is good too. It's good to know that some users, they don't even go to your homepage to do some activities, right? They might Google it first. And then as far as, oh, in the intro, I hope you saw how I was trying to be kind of nice and friendly, then flip the switch, and then you get nice and friendly at the end too when you're gathering that information. And then real quickly, like I said, I give a whole class and a whole nother webinar about how to do these kind of reports, but it's really great to summarize these things, to actually quantify them on some kind of scale. And you can see here, just putting things in a nice digestible thing. You can see in the top left, the use cases. This is very important to kind of boil this down into something digestible, something that stakeholders can look at and understand. And what's better than, you know, bar charts and donut charts. So some final takeaways, and then we'll take some questions is, so, you know, there's many variables when it comes to doing usability testing, but usability testing is the very best method for determining if the website is functioning as intended and usable, right? There's 40 years plus worth of research on this, and I've seen it in my own practice. You can test with low fidelity prototypes, so you don't need to spend a lot of time. I encourage people to remember, if you have the budget to test 15 participants, do that first one on just paper prototyping. It's good to get this information early and often. How many times have you like shown a design so long that internally people start to like it before you've even gathered user input? And this is what I mean by user-centered. You only need 5 participants to get useful data. Don't overdo it. I understand the propensity to try to like, you know, back yourself up even more thoroughly. Just if you use a reporting method that boils it down and you explain that what we're going for here is not statistically sound, what we're going for is behavioral research. When you find a problem, it should be fixed, period, right? And if you test 5 people and you find the same large problem happen 5 times, most likely other people will find that to be a big problem as well. And then usability testing gives you the biggest bang for your buck out of all the UX resource methods. So it's the one, I understand that it's daunting and it does take practice, but out of all the methods, I see so many organizations lean on Google Analytics because they believe that it gives them these deep insights. Google Analytics are great, but if you pair your Google Analytics with some behavioral research, That's truly user-centered design. And I hope I've convinced you to try to put these into practice. So the fact that usability testing is hard is a pure myth. Testing low fidelity prototypes can unearth 85% of all user error, right? They're cheap, they're easy. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. I want to say thanks for attending. I hope this was insightful. I encourage you to download the materials and start doing this today. And feel free to reach out to me or anyone at any time. I'd love to talk to you more about this. Like I said, I've given a full 2-day seminar on this, but if you want to dive deeper into it, we'd be more than happy to help.
Well, thank you so much, Trevor. And thank you, Sutan, for the incredible, I mean, that was just really amazing user test. I really appreciated it. There's a great question that came in, and it's pretty wordy, so I want to make sure I get it right. Do you have any advice for testing scenarios / tasks that in the real world may resonate with a test participant much differently than a prototype ever could? For example, when signing up to participate in a fundraising event, the user typically has a personal relationship with the organization or the cause. A usability test participant will never get that personal connection from fake data and prototype, which may impact how they use it and understand it. How do you work around that? And it's a really interesting question about like a personalized experience that's based on the data that we know about a user, which we wouldn't know in a paper prototype. Trevor, this is a tricky one.
Actually, this is straightforward. I think I understand the question. So I'm going to answer it in 2 different ways. One is all of that, every single testing method has bias implicitly in it, right? So there's going to be some bias. I went through all these methods for scrubbing very egregious bias that it was going to literally ruin your data. But so we have to deal with the fact that we're in a test environment. But there's ways to mitigate this. One is if you find your test participants should be actual representative users, meaning literal people. So they literally have that background. Now this demo, because I wanted this, because I've done this talk many times, I wanted literally anyone that I could pick in the world to be able to do this test. But for you and your organization, you wouldn't just pick your friend that's a psychologist, right? You would pick the person who, a real user who really is knowledgeable. So you don't need to bake all that into your scenario because they already have that knowledge. Another thing is people ask me all the time, should I test like power users or people who are very knowledgeable and very active within our community and our organization versus someone who's not? And the answer to that is, what are your personas? If one of your personas is new user, then you should test a new user that's a potential community member or whatever, organization, someone that follows your organization. Or do you want someone who's been around for a long time? Now, if you have this question, I'd highly advocate to index closer to people who people who have been around for a while. And one trick you can do, and I've done this with large organizations, is you build like a preferred user kind of Rolodex of people that sign up, and you can give them a badge. People love badges. You give them a badge to put on LinkedIn that says, I'm the organization, I'm on this super committee that that contributes once a year to these kind of tests. So that's a great thing to do. And as far as the paper prototyping, that was my first answer. Believe it or not, that was one answer. So the second answer is when it comes to the nuance you lose with a low fidelity prototype, that's where the top task list really comes in handy. And there's a step I kind of glossed over, but it's in the handouts, is converting your top task list into your usability test questions and building that scenario. Even if you're using someone, so it's a twofold answer, right? You want to find people, in your case, you want to find people that are very entrenched in your organization's knowledge to begin with. But not only that, if you put them in a real world scenario that resonates, then those two things combined will ensure that it doesn't matter how low fidelity the prototype is, they will have an understanding of these kind of workflows that you walk them through.
So, I mean, forgive me, but I'm so meat and potatoes about these things. I really need like a practical thing to ground me. So if we're talking about like we're bringing a participants coming in for a fundraising event and we're creating a personalized page for them. in the scenario where we're doing like a paper prototype, would we be writing out, like, would we prep that paper prototype before we hand it to them? Or how would we personalize that message? If I'm that fundraising, if I'm the participant, how do you say, Joe, it was, last time you donated, it was a year ago, maybe it's time to re-up, or what are we testing the message, or how does that work?
Yeah, you would literally write out what you would put on, what you're planning on putting into the actual website that you're building. So if you're building one of these, I don't know, help me out with the terms, Joe, you know these better than me, but like, some customized page, it comes from a template. It's not literally customized, right? You're not literally handwriting. And if you are literally handwriting your emails to your people, then just use that, right? But yeah, give it to them as close as it'll possibly be when they receive it. The more specific you get with your prototype, the more accurate your data will be, right? And the more you'll be able to poke holes in it.
Awesome. Is there with respect to like one of the things that when I first saw this talk that really struck me is that you don't have to do lab coat and tests, like a test environment. You mind just what is like the bare minimum, like for people who've never done this before? I when I watch you do this, I think of like I think of people who are just like really skilled at something and it looks easy because they've done it 1,000 times, right? Just like what are the biggest pitfalls you're thinking about, like when somebody's doing this for the first time?
Yeah, so and let me reassure you, my first 100 usability tests were terrible, and I threw away a lot of data. You're gonna have to throw away a lot of data, so just be aware of that. So meaning if you say something totally biasing and leading, you cannot use that question for that participant. So there's been I've written up many reports in my early career that said we only got 4 answers out of the 5 participants for this question, and that's because I led them, right? So it's this fine line between when to intervene and when not. So that's why I like people to internalize those 3 techniques. They're easy to learn, they're simple. Why do we, the colors and the funny names, so it sticks in their mind, right? Mm-hmm. And there is a slide, one of the handouts is the slide deck, and there's a slide with a bolded list of common errors. And the one I see most is people just intervening at the wrong time. It's human nature to help the user, especially if you are the designer, right? So if you can have a different designer and a different tester, that's ideal, right? And when that happens, I even say that in the beginning during that rapport building. I'll say, oh, like I'm not even on the team that did this. They've asked me to help, right? Because that gives more distance, right? The worst thing you can do is seem like a real needy kind of facilitator that's like really hanging on their everything. Like you don't want them to think that they need to succeed. You want them to think that you're there objectively seeing how they would really work, So the more you can articulate that this is broken and we want to fix it, the better. And we want to fix it the way you think, the better. Did I answer the question? I kind of went on a tangent there.